Hey guys, this is Katie, and I'm here to present about my Bank Street interview. So here's a little bit of background information. We can go ahead and call my participant Sarah Lee. She is a former early childhood teacher and a current early childhood professor. She has actually taught this course at other universities throughout the country. And last spring, she had the opportunity to visit Bank Street and observe there for an entire day. This interview took place in person. It was about 10 questions and it lasted around 30 minutes. Key finding number 1. So I asked Sarah Lee, in her opinion, what were the strengths of the Bank Street approach? And this is what she said. The positive environment, the number of adults per children. They pay attention to social emotional development of the child, including the aspects of ethnic identity. Social studies is very present. They do a lot of work with social studies and issues of race. So in connecting this to our textbook states that social studies is at the core of the curriculum. And our textbook even goes on to define social studies as the relationship between and among people and their environments, the world in which we live, and our place in it. So the information that Sarah Lee shared with me and the information found in our textbook is pretty consistent that social studies plays a large role in the Bank Street curriculum. As far as my personal insights, I have had elementary practicums and done a lot of observations in elementary school settings. And basically, from what I've seen, social studies is almost non-existent. I think I shared this in one of our previous discussions when we were talking about Bank Street, but at one observation in particular, I happened to ask the second grade teacher, when they did social studies lessons and that sort of thing. And she kind of laughed and said that they were lucky to fit a social studies lesson in maybe once every other week, and it was just like a 30-minute lesson. And that they spent most of the time working on reading and writing and math, and that they didn't really have time for social studies in the daily schedule. So the experience that I have is very different from the Bank Street approach that is built on around social studies. Finding number 2. I asked Sarah Lee, in her opinion, what were the weaknesses of the Bank Street approach, and this was her response. A weakness in my eyes is that they aren't that unique. They are different, but I have seen environments just as positive and engaging in other locations. When I went to Reggio, for example, you're just like wow at the door because you've never seen anything like it. The environment is different, the teacher interactions are different, how children handle themselves is different. You don't have that reaction when you walk into Bank Street. In connecting this to our textbook states that Bank Street approach is constructivist, and that also many early childhood and elementary teachers use the Bank Street approach throughout the country. Therefore, it's not going to be wildly different than any other approach we've studied so far or what we've seen out in the field because it's constructivist, and we know that that's just good practice. This being said, while I was reading about Bank Street in the textbook, I thought that it was very unique because of their emphasis on social studies. So I was pretty surprised when Sarah Lee shared with me that, in her opinion, it wasn't that unique of an approach. So just something to think about, must an approach be radically different or unique in order to be good? In my opinion, I would say no, that all or most good approaches are going to be similar because they're probably going to be constructivist and child-centered and developmentally appropriate and all those things that we know to be good practice. Finding number 3. I asked Sarah Lee to tell me about what she observed as far as curriculum at the Bank Street School, and here's what she said. We had an opportunity to meet with a teacher and ask questions, so I asked about what they do, and that was a big letdown, because they used Lucy Calkins' literacy program, a packaged program, and they used some other packaged program for math. According to our textbook, teachers are expected to develop curriculum, content, and practices within a stated framework of valued aims and beliefs. So unlike the creative curriculum, for example, Bank Street doesn't have a curriculum. It's more of a framework, and it's up to the teachers to come up with a curriculum that supports that framework. And in this case, the teacher chose to use a packaged program. So my personal insight on the matter is that not all packaged programs are bad, and just because a teacher uses packaged programs doesn't mean that they're a bad teacher or that it's a bad program. As we saw in the creative curriculum approach, packaged programs have a potential to be really awesome, and that it kind of depends on how the teacher uses it. If a teacher is dependent upon the package and follows the script to a T with no differentiation and no tying it to student interest and that sort of thing, then yeah, it's not very good. But at the same time, Bank Street School has to teach the New York State standards. So I can see where a packaged program might be beneficial to teachers because it already has that groundwork done, and it already has activities and laid out that are connected to the standards. And so, then that teacher can use that as a basis for their activities and instruction in the classroom. And it could really be great as long as the teacher builds off of that. In this case, I'm not really sure how the teacher used the packaged program, and because Sarah Lee only observed at Bank Street for one day, I'm not even sure if she really knows how they use that packaged program. So in conclusion, I think I will use what I learned about Bank Street, specifically the idea of teaching to the whole child and that thinking and emotions are interconnected. I feel like the Bank Street approach is really applicable to an elementary school setting, unlike maybe some of the other approaches that we've discussed in this class that are more tailored to early childhood as far as preschool age and pre-K. So I feel like I will definitely be using the Bank Street whole child approach in my own classroom, no matter where I decide to teach. As far as the process of interviewing and transcribing, finding somebody to do the interview with was pretty difficult, just because there is one Bank Street in New York, and trying to find those connections is difficult. But once I did find somebody to interview, it wasn't as stressful as I thought it was going to be. And this is probably because I had a personal relationship with that person. So if it had been a stranger, I think maybe it would have been a little bit more stressful. And then I loved transcribing. That sounds really nerdy, but it was kind of a mindless activity. And so, just pausing and typing and then starting and listening and typing, and it was kind of almost relaxing to me, which is totally nerdy. In the future, one thing that I would do differently is try to find somebody who had more experience with the Bank Street approach to interview. Sarah Lee was great and she had some amazing information, but I just wish I would have been able to talk to somebody who was an actual teacher at the Bank Street School, or an administrator or a college student even that had gone to Bank Street College, because I just feel like the information might have been a little bit more rich and come from a little bit different of a perspective. And in this portion, I would ask if you guys had any questions, but obviously, um, you know, this is a recording and not in person. So if you do have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email or talk to me in person in class. And I look forward to hearing some of your feedback. Thanks for taking the time to watch my presentation. Hope you learned some new things.